and a man of some wealth, whereas Miss Sharp was an articled pupil, for whom Miss Pinkerton had done, as she thought, quite enough, without conferring upon her at parting the high honour of the dictionary. As we are to see a great deal of Amelia, there is no harm in saying at the outset of our acquaintance that she was a dear little creature, and a great mercy it is, both in life and in novels, which abound in villains of the most sombre sort, that we are to have for a constant companion so guileless and good-natured a person. As she is not a heroine, there is no need to describe her person. Indeed, I am afraid that her nose was rather short than otherwise, and her cheeks a great deal too round and red for a heroine, but her face blushed with rosy health, and her lips with the freshest smiles, and she had a pair of eyes which sparkled with the brightest and honestest good humour, except indeed when they filled with tears, and that was a great deal too often, for the silly thing would cry over a dead canary bird, or over a mouse that the cat haply had seized upon, or over the end of a novel, were it ever so stupid. Well then, the flowers, and the presents, and the trunks, and bonnet-boxes of Miss Sedley having been arranged in the carriage, together with a very small and weather-beaten old trunk with Miss Sharp's card neatly nailed upon it, the hour for parting came, and the grief of that moment was considerably lessened by the admirable discourse which Miss Pinkerton addressed to her pupil. A seed-cake and a bottle of wine were produced in the drawing-room, as on the solemn occasions of the visits of parents, and these refreshments being partaken of, Miss Sedley was at liberty to depart. "You'll go in and say good-bye to Miss Pinkerton, Becky," said Miss Jemima, to a young lady of whom nobody took any notice, and who was coming downstairs with her own bandbox. "I suppose I must," said Miss Sharp, and, much to the wonder of Miss Jemima, and the latter having knocked at the door and receiving permission to come in, Miss Sharp advanced in a very unconcerned manner, and said in French, and with a perfect accent, "Mademoiselle, je viens vous faire mes adieux." Miss Pinkerton did not understand French. She only directed those who did, but, biting her lips and throwing up her venerable and Roman-nosed head, on the top of which figured a large and solemn turban, she said, "Miss Sharp, I wish you a good morning." As the Hammersmith Semiramis spoke, she waved one hand, both by way of adieu, and to give Miss Sharp an opportunity of shaking one of the fingers of the hand which was left out for that purpose. Miss Sharp only folded her own hands with a very frigid smile and bow, and quite declined to accept the proffered honour, on which Semiramis tossed up her turban more indignantly than ever. In fact, it was a little battle between the young lady and the old one, and the latter was worsted. "Heaven bless you, my child," said she, embracing Amelia, and scowling the while over the girl's shoulder at Miss Sharp. "Come away, Becky," said Miss Jemima, pulling the young woman away in great alarm, and the drawing-room door closed upon them forever. Then came the struggle and parting below. Words refused to tell it. All the servants were there in the hall, all the dear friends, all the young ladies, the dancing-master, who had just arrived, and there was such a scuffling and hugging and kissing and crying as no pen can depict, and as the tender heart would fain pass over. The embracing was over, they parted. That is, Miss Sedley parted from her friends. Miss Sharp had demurely entered the carriage some minutes before. Nobody cried for leaving her. The coachman slammed the door on his young, weeping mistress. He sprang up onto the carriage. "Stop!" cried Miss Jemima, rushing to the gate with a parcel. "It's some sandwiches, my dear," said she to Amelia. "You may be hungry, you know, and Becky Sharp, here's a book for you that my sister, Johnson's dictionary, you know. You mustn't leave us without that. Goodbye. Drive on, coachman. God bless you." And the kind creature retreated into the garden, overcome with emotion. But, lo! And just as the coach drove off, Miss Sharp put her pale face out of the window and actually flung the book back into the garden. This almost caused Jemima to faint with terror. "Well, I never!" she said. "What an audacious—" Emotion prevented her from completing either sentence. The carriage rolled away. The great gates were closed. The bell rang for the dancing lesson. "How could you do so, Rebecca?" said Miss Sedley after a pause. "Why, do you think Miss Pinkerton will come out and order me back to the black hole?" said Rebecca, laughing. "No, but I hate the whole house," continued Miss Sharp in a fury. "I hope I may never set eyes on it again. I wish it were in the bottom of the Thames, I do. And if Miss Pinkerton were there, I wouldn't pick her out, that I wouldn't." "Oh, Rebecca, Rebecca, for shame!" cried Miss Sedley. "How can you? How dare you have such wicked, revengeful thoughts?" "Revenge may be wicked, but it's natural," answered Miss Rebecca. "I'm no angel." And, to say the truth, she certainly was not. Miss Sharp's father was an artist, and in that quality had given lessons of drawing at Miss Pinkerton's school. He was a clever man, a pleasant companion, a careless student, with a great propensity for running into debt, and a partiality for the tavern. When he was drunk, he used to beat his wife and daughter, and the next morning, with a headache, he would rail at the world for its neglect of his genius. As it was with the utmost difficulty that he could keep himself, and as he owed money for a mile round Soho where he lived, he thought to better his circumstances by marrying a young woman of the French nation, who was by profession an opera girl. Rebecca's mother had had some education somewhere, and her daughter spoke French with purity and a Parisian accent. It was, in those days, rather a rare accomplishment, and led to her engagement with the orthodox Miss Pinkerton. For, her mother being dead, her father, finding himself not likely to recover after his third attack of delirium tremens, wrote a manly and pathetic letter to Miss Pinkerton, recommending the orphan child to her protection, and so descended to the grave after 2 bailiffs had quarrelled over his corpse. Rebecca was 17 when she came to Chiswick, and was bound over as an articled pupil, her duties being to talk French, and her privileges to live cost-free, and with a few guineas a year to gather scraps of knowledge from the professors who attended the school. She was small and slight in person, pale, sandy-haired, and with eyes habitually cast down. When they looked up, they were very large, odd, and attractive. By the side of many tall and bouncing young ladies in the establishment, Rebecca Sharp looked like a child. But she had the dismal precocity of poverty. She had never been a girl, she said. She had been a woman since she was 8 years old. Oh, why did Miss Pinkerton let such a dangerous bird into her cage? The fact is, the old lady believed Rebecca to be the meekest creature in the world, so admirably, on the occasions when her father brought her to Chiswick, used Rebecca to perform the part of the ingénue. She took advantage of the means of study the place offered her, and as she was already a musician and a good linguist, she speedily went through the little course of study which was considered necessary for ladies in those days. Her music she practised incessantly, and one day she was overheard to play a piece so well that Miss Pinkerton thought, wisely, that she could spare herself the expense of a master for the juniors, and intimated to Miss Sharp that she was to instruct them in music for the future. The girl refused. "I am here to speak French with the children," Rebecca said abruptly, "not to teach them music and save money for you. Give me money and I will teach them." Miss Pinkerton was obliged to yield, and of course disliked her from that day. "For 35 years," she said, and with great justice, "I have never seen